week 6 of the fantasy football season, and here's top 20 quarterbacks I'm ranking this week. Number 1, Lamar Jackson of the Baltimore Ravens. I think Lamar's been the most consistent and best quarterback in terms of fantasy football this season. Last week, what a game it was for Lamar in the comeback victory at the Cincinnati Bengals. And this week, a pretty decent matchup versus a mid to poor Washington Commander defense, where I think this matchup could be a shootout between these two teams. I like Lamar once again to have a great game. Number 2, Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Burrow, it's been a great season for him, even though this Bengal team's 1-4, 3 games in a row over 30 points for the Cincinnati Bengal team. Jamar Chase is back in midseason form. Last week, 10 catches, 193 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 5 touchdowns total thrown for Joe Burrow, over 390 yards. So this week, a great matchup on Sunday night at the New York Giants. And Joe Burrow, he's spreading the football out. He's getting the ball to his playmakers, and he's looked real healthy and good this season, even though his team is 1-4. Number 3, Josh Allen of the Buffalo Bills. Allen got banged up at the end of that game last week at the Houston Texans, but I believe he'll be ready to go Monday night. Big division showdown at the New York Jets. And Josh Allen's definitely had trouble throughout his career at the New York Jets at times, but this week they know they got to go in there, win the ball game if they want to keep ahead in the division and keep the New York Jets down. So Josh Allen, usually after a mediocre to bad performance, he comes out, has a big game, and this week I think he does it. Number 4, Jayden Daniels of the Washington Commanders. Jayden Daniels taking the league by storm is this impressive rookie. And this week, a tough matchup, no doubt about it, going to Baltimore at the Baltimore Ravens. So Daniels, he could run the football, second best rushing quarterback in fantasy football. He's got poise in the pocket. He's a playmaker, makes things happen. And this Commander team 4-1 with him turning this franchise around. So this week, definitely a tougher matchup. But with his upside and running ability, especially, Daniels is locked in the top 5. Number 5, Jalen Hurts of the Philadelphia Eagles. Hurts getting his top weapons back. A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith in this week's ball game. Jalen Hurts, it's been up and down so far this season, but now coming off a bye week, and like I said, to get 2 big-time wide receivers like that is going to boost any quarterback up, and especially this week in a matchup versus the Cleveland Browns, where their defense hasn't been good this season, even though last year they were one of the best defenses in the league. So Jalen Hurts, with reinforcements coming back, I think goes out there and has a great game. Number 6, Jordan Love of the Green Bay Packers. Jordan Love in this Packer team, obviously played good football with Love in the lineup this season. Last week, not a monster game for Jordan Love. He had 20 fantasy points, hit Tucker Kraft for 2 touchdowns in that game, and they got good weapons. Jaden Reed, Tucker Kraft, who's emerged, Josh Jacobs in the backfield. Romeo Doubs should return in this ball game. Dotavian Wicks has showed flashes, and he's another quarterback like Joe Burrow that spreads that football out, and he'll get some running yards as well for you on the ground. So this week in a matchup versus Arizona, where their defense hasn't stopped anyone this season, Jordan Love, I think, has a better game this week than last. Number 7, C.J. Stroud of the Houston Texans. Nico Collins going to be out in this ball game for the Houston Texans. But C.J. Stroud, it doesn't matter who's on the field. He goes out there, spreads the football out, and he makes plays. And he's top 5 in the season in passing yards as Stroud. And this week, it's a tougher matchup in New England. Their defense has been bend but don't break for the most part this season. But C.J. Stroud, like I said, he's got a great IQ. He spreads that football out, and he knows when to make the throws and the big-time plays, and that's why this Texan team's 4-1, and that's why last season they turned things around. Diggs is his number 1 wide receiver this week, and Tank Dell, number 2 guy. I believe it's not going to bother C.J. Stroud, and he still has a good ball game. Number 8, Baker Mayfield of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I know this week's a tougher matchup in New Orleans, but when you got wideouts like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, one of the best 1-2 combos at the position on the same team, it's going to make everything easier, I believe, for Baker Mayfield. So this season, 4 out of 5 games with 2 or more touchdowns for Baker Mayfield, and he's a quarterback that fits this system perfectly for this Tampa Bay Buc team. And like I said, even in a matchup that's not that great on paper, I think he could go out there and get the job done. He's been a consistent quarterback all year. Number 9, Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals. I know not a great matchup on paper at Green Bay, but with his running ability, and last week went out there and had a decent ball game versus at the San Francisco 49ers in victory. I think Kyler Murray could go out there this week, and like I said, with his running ability, the ceiling's unlimited at times. Last week we saw a 50-yard rushing touchdown for Kyler Murray. So this week in Green Bay, in a game most likely where they're trailing early and often, and he's going to have to throw the football a whole lot and use his legs a lot, is Kyler Murray. I think he goes out there, has a decent performance. Number 10, Kirk Cousins of the Atlanta Falcons. So Kirk Cousins definitely moving up the ranking board after last week, coming out of nowhere with a 509 passing yard week game with 4 touchdowns. Him and Drake London on the same page. Darnell Mooney's been a great addition in the offseason as well to his Atlanta Falcon team. He's a deep ball threat and yard after catch receiver. And this week in a great matchup with the Carolina Panthers, Kirk Cousins is definitely now a fantasy option. And we've seen it throughout his career. Weeks where he goes off like he did last week. I'm not saying he's going to do that this week, but in a great matchup with Carolina, it wouldn't be surprising to me if he has 22, 25 range fantasy points. Number 11, Justin Fields of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Fields, he's definitely been a better pocket passer this season than he's had in years past. And this week, a great matchup with the Vegas Raiders. They can't stop anyone. We saw Bo Nix last week have 27 fantasy points, where he's more of a game manager and not a quarterback who's going to throw a whole lot. So Justin Fields, I think it's a good ceiling in this one at the Vegas Raiders. I know he's running the football less as Justin Fields, where it's more of a traditional offense, like I said, with him being in the pocket and running this Steeler system the way they want it. But this week at Vegas, I think he could be decent, is Justin Fields. And like I said, he's got good upside, even though some weeks it's not all that great. But last week, even in a game where he didn't look great, still had 20 fantasy points in that one. Number 12, Dak Prescott of the Dallas Cowboys. This week, a decent matchup versus the Lions. I believe this could be a potential shootout between these two teams. But this Cowboy offensive line's banged up, and Hutchinson, I definitely believe, could be a problem getting to the quarterback for this Cowboy offensive line and put pressure on Prescott. But Prescott, even last week, turnovers in that game, including 2 interceptions. Obviously, in the red zone, it wasn't great, but when it came down to it, Dak Prescott went out there and threw the game-winning touchdown on 4th down with 20 seconds left to hit Jalen Tolbert, who's an emerging weapon for him, and also the game-winning drive. But this week, like I said, it could be tough sledding for Prescott in this one. 13, Brock Purdy of the San Francisco 49ers. Purdy, it's been up and down, one good week, one bad week. And this week, it's definitely a good matchup with the Seattle Seahawks for Brock Purdy in this one, where Seattle can't stop anyone. We've seen it over the last couple weeks. They've had trouble, obviously, is Seattle, 42 points to the Lions. And last week, the Giants came in there to Seattle, and they scored 29 points. I know one of them was a block kick for a touchdown towards the end of the game. But Brock Purdy's been inconsistent this season. I know Debo ain't 100%, but Brandon Ayuk had the breakout game last week, and Kittle's been great this season. So I think Brock Purdy, I'm not going to say it's a high ceiling for him, even in a good matchup this week, because I don't know what we're going to get from him. He's been inconsistent. 14, Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. He's only had one big game this season, was Goff, and that was in week 4 before going on bye for Jared Goff versus Seattle Seahawks. So this week, good matchup at the Dallas Cowboys, where their defense is banged up, and it pretty much hasn't been good this season besides the 2 games versus the giant Pittsburgh Steelers. So this week here, Jared Goff has all his weapons intact. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, Sam Laporta should be more healthier now after he had the ankle injury and still played in that week 4 game. So this week, good matchup for Jared Goff. Just the upside at times is capped as well when you got Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery in the backfield. Great running backs. 15, Geno Smith of the Seattle Seahawks. Geno Smith, he's been a good quarterback this season. Believe it or not, top 10 in fantasy points at the position. And also second in the league in passing yards. When you got DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith-Njigba, those are 3 great weapons, no doubt about it, in the offense. But this week, a tougher matchup versus the 49ers. But we also always know Geno's got that running upside as well. And last week, he did have 72 yards on the ground, is Geno Smith. So with that upside, I think he still could be a decent option. But like I said, in a tougher matchup, I'm going to limit expectations a little bit. 16, Anthony Richardson of the Indianapolis Colts. We don't know if Richardson's going to play in this ball game for the Indianapolis Colts. But to be honest, this offense is operated better, in my opinion, with Joe Flacco at quarterback. And this week, it's a tougher matchup at Tennessee, where they're, believe it or not, a pretty solid defense for the most part this season. Anthony Richardson, I know all the hype coming into the year was the upside with the running yards. But besides week 1, that monster game versus the Texans, we really haven't seen much from Richardson. And also, he's a quarterback that doesn't have a lot of throwing attempts. Even in ball games, they've been trailing. So this week, not at 100% if he plays and not spreading the football out to his receivers. I don't think Richardson has that high of a ceiling. 17, Caleb Williams of the Chicago Bears. Last week, a great game for Williams. Over 300 yards, 2 touchdowns. no turnovers. This week, a great matchup versus Jacksonville Jaguars, but I believe this could be a game where the running game is making waves for the Chicago Bear team. And Caleb Williams, he's still a quarterback that's holding on to the football a whole lot. Not a great offensive line. And this Jaguar team I know is not good, but just off of one good game, I'm not going to really move up Caleb Williams that high in the rankings. 18, Daniel Jones of the New York Giants. Daniel Jones, believe it or not, the last 2 out of 3 games, 20-plus fantasy points for fantasy owners. Daniel Jones, we know he's a running quarterback for the most part. Malik Neighbors should return in this game, and he's been great this season. Wan'Dale Robinson's been solid as well. So this offense is better than people thought, and Daniel Jones has been serviceable, especially at a quarterback position that hasn't been great. So this week versus the Bengals, who's not a great defense this year, I think Jones could be a back-end deep league option and 2-quarterback league option. 19, Justin Herbert of Los Angeles Chargers. This week, a tough matchup at Denver. I know the weapons aren't all that great, obviously, for this Charger team. Quentin Johnson, the number 1, Lab McConkey, Joshua Palmer, Will Disley, Hayden Hurst at the tight end position, A.K. Dobbins in the backfield. So I think this week it's a grinded-out type of game between 2 division rivals. And this Bronco defense, one of the better defenses in the league. So Herbert, if he had more experienced and better weapons, obviously, then he's a quarterback that'll be more up there in the rankings this season. But his ceiling is pretty low. In the 20th and final quarterback I'm rankings, Trevor Lawrence of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Lawrence this season, he's been not good for this Jaguar team. Last week, a good game, though. 371 yards, 2 touchdowns. Brian Thomas, receiver, first-round draft pick for this Jaguar team. And Christian Kirk's been good. And also Evan Ingram's returning. But this week in a tough matchup at Chicago, there's not much upside for Trevor Lawrence. But like I said, last week was his best game of the year. And maybe he could build off that. So that's the top 20 quarterbacks I'm ranking for Week 6 of the fantasy football season.